Welcome to the Human Impact Theory podcast. I'm Jacqueline Way, founder of 365 Give, and your host. Welcome to my home. Our podcast is here to inspire you with real life stories from everyday people, learn together from researchers and scientists, and empower you with practical tools from visionary leaders to create a life you love, a happy life. Real change is real simple, but it takes practice. And this month, we have got your back. Thank you so much for being with us here today. We know how valuable your time is, and we appreciate your spending it with us. The month of March marks a very special day, one of our favorite. It's the International Day of Happiness. We are all about happiness at 365 Give, and we know it matters to you as well because really, who doesn't want to have a happier life? We went on a search. We wanted to know what your most pressing questions about happiness are. Our dear friends, Google and YouTube, told us everything. And today we're going to uncover the most searched questions about happiness and answer them today with our special guest, the happiness doctor. We're going to be sharing practical tools and strategies, even practices that you can start using today to create a happier, more fulfilling life. We have a very special guest and good friend, Dr. Elia, joining us today. He's also known as the Happiness Doctor. Dr. Elia is the president of the Happiness Center, an expert in positive psychology who has helped thousands of people achieve success and a better life balance. He's also the author of the #1 selling book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, and co-author of The 7 Keys to Navigating Crisis, and host his very first TV show. It's called The Happy Hour. I was blessed to be a guest on his show on the Mental Health Network. So, are you ready to learn how to turn on your happiness switch starting today? Then let's get started. Dr. Elio, my friend, welcome to the Human Impact Theory podcast. We're so excited to have you here with us today. Thank you for coming.
It's always a pleasure, Jacqueline. I would do anything for you, you know that. So, and it's always good to see your smiling, beautiful face. So, good
Well,
to be.
lucky me, and thank you so much. It's a really important month this month. March is coming up, one of the most important days to me that we should all be focusing on. International Happiness Day is coming up at the end of March. And I thought there's no better person to have on this show for this month than you because you are truly the expert in happiness. And we want to know the answers to Google and YouTube's most important questions and what people are asking about happiness. So, are you ready? We just said we're going to have literally a power hour with back-to-back questions and practices and tools that we can give people. So, are you ready to go, my friend?
I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do this.
All right, let's do it. Okay, so we're going to start at the very beginning of the whole happiness questions. And, what is happiness really? Is it an emotion? Is it an action? Is it like, tell us about happiness. Give us your definition of happiness.
I'm going to give you somebody else's definition first because it's so profound and it was given 2,500 years ago in ancient Greece. Imagine
Oh,
underneath the Acropolis, Plato and Socrates and Aristotle. Aristotle said the following. He said, happiness is the whole purpose and meaning of life, the whole aim and end of human existence. But I mean, that basically is like that's it. It's hard to improve upon that kind of definition on happiness. To me, that is the purpose of life, is to
mm,
find happiness. Happiness and love and kindness, they're all interrelated.
mm.
Um, but isn't it true when we ask about our kids? You have kids, I have kids. We talk to parents all the time. What would you like for your children? What is the answer to that? I just want them to be
Happy. I want them to have a
everybody.
happy life, right?
Right.
Isn't that what we're here talking about today?
Happy and healthy, and that's true. Like you, I speak all over the world about happiness and wellness. That's the question that I ask every audience, regardless of what country I'm in, and it's true across the board, regardless of ethnicity, nationality, socioeconomic status, religious affiliation, gender, whatever, sexuality, doesn't matter. What do you want for your kids? I just want them to be happy. That's always the case. It's always universal. So so then the question is, okay, we all agree. Now what? So that's
Now what?
now what? And how do we do it?
Exactly. And I love that definition. I think it's all encompassing, which is the best part. It tries to get defined again and again. And, when we look at happiness and we're going to talk about kindness, we're going to talk about gratitude, and me, I love to talk about love because that's where I think it all comes from, right? Is when we start with love, the happiness just comes pouring through us as well. So I
Indeed.
think the big question right now, and we talk about, and we're going to talk a little bit in the introduction. I told everybody about your book about being in crisis. I think we're in an interesting time in our planet as we continue to go through interesting times. And I think people really want to know today and the big question is how can I be happier right now? What are some of the things people can do to be happier today?
I'll tell you one happiness hack that I do,
Okay.
uh, which I've been doing since the pandemic. Actually, that's when it started. I used to walk like 3 miles a day,
Mm.
like 2 or 3 times a week because I'm getting older. I'm like, I got to exercise and so on. But as the pandemic hit the first time and the stress level increased to me personally, but family, extended family, friends, society, globally, the full pandemic, I realized that part of self-care, I couldn't do self-care part-time. Now, that's the best way to say
Mm.
it. I'm like, I got to up the ante. So I started walking every day and I haven't stopped. It's been 5 years now and it's a
Wow.
non-negotiable. But the hack, I guess, is I used to always be on the phone, always busy talking on the phone. I realized at some point that, you know what, why don't you leave your phone behind and go for your hour walk, get your 3 miles in. And I call those my gratitude walks. So
Ooh.
there's two things that are happening simultaneously. And I'm grateful for the blue skies and the trees and the birds that are singing, and just grateful for everything that I see, the little critters running around, whatever, being close to nature. So I think that's the trifecta: walk, be close to nature, and express gratitude. You do that for an hour a day and you start off your day, your batteries are full. And it's unlike your phone, that energy is not going to run out at the end of the day. And that's how, because you recharge both physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually, and you do that within an hour. I'm not saying that I don't take my phone ever, but at least 50% of my walks are consciously and deliberately, I leave my phone behind so I can concentrate and be present to my environment. And I
Mm.
express that gratitude. If I'm talking out loud, maybe people might think I'm a little crazy, but I'm like grateful. I'm express gratitude. And
You just covered a lot there, and
I
I want to
know,
go
right?
back
In
and
one
let's
hour,
do like a
three things.
checklist. That was
Yes.
amazing. So thank you
Thank you.
first of all for sharing one of your own practices because I really look at happiness in my own life. It's how I discovered happiness too, is because I practiced every day through giving. When we started 365 Give. And so I want to go back over some of those rituals because there's a lot in there to unpack. And so the first thing that you're saying to people, move your body. You gotta get out. And actually the overreaching story to this is self-care. It actually has to start
Right.
with us. And we're going to get into some more questions in a minute about the outside world. But I think that's such a big part that we miss. I know as a parent and certainly as a mother, I feel like I missed a whole decade of my life because I was so focused on my family and when the kids were little. But what you're really saying is happiness needs to start with us and start with those self-care rituals. And in your case, this is what works best for you. But aren't these also proven by science, Dr. Elia? Like, doesn't science tell us that when we move our body and we get exercise in a way that works best for us? I do CrossFit. Not everybody's going to do CrossFit.
Right.
Walking is your tool, right?
Yeah,
These are some of
and
the
the
things
whole
we can look at.
yeah, and it's not that I need to become a triathlete or anything. It's not about, it's
Right.
actually movement and it's moderate movement. I'm not running
Mm.
a marathon. I'm not even running actually. I'm walking.
Yeah.
I think for me it works better. My wife, if it's too cold outside or the elements, she'll walk inside on the
Right.
treadmill. For me, I love the elements. I think even if it's snowing, I don't care because it makes me feel alive. I just
Mm.
like being outside in spite of the elements. Obviously, if there's a blizzard, I'm not going to do it, but you know what I mean. But for the most part,
Absolutely.
I want to be outside. I
Yeah.
like the fresh air. I like to look at the blue skies. Um, Maybe it's more convenient to do inside. It's nice and warm, but for me, it makes me feel alive. So walking in nature specifically elevates my mood,
Mm, I
and,
love
that's
that.
been
And
proven
and we know
and
we're
that's been
making a
proven scientifically.
connection, right, to something bigger than ourselves. So you talked about getting outside. We're moving our bodies. We're being in nature. We know that that's definitely has been shown to improve our happiness levels. Connecting to the world around you. And I want to make sure everybody picked up on this one piece that you were like, yeah, I look at the blue sky, I look at the trees, I look at the things that are around us. Because for me, and I'm hoping that everyone else will understand this too, when you start noticing the things that are around you on these walks, that all of a sudden you're getting out of that voice in your head, right? That running conversation that's going, whether that's negative or positive, all of a sudden your attention is somewhere else. And then that's the next step that I wanted everybody to really hear in what you said is the present moment, right? You're not getting lost up here in what I like to refer to as a monkey mind, but it's in the present moment of all the beauty that's around us, even if it's snowing, even if it's raining, because there's beautiful moments in that too. So I love that you covered all of those. We're talking about self-care,
Yeah.
what's going to work best for you, getting out in nature, being in the present moment. I mean, right there, that covers off like a whole gamut of how you can be happier in 1 hour a day.
And it leads to to gratitude. I think that's the most, and consciously
Mm,
being
that's
grateful
right.
for the little things and then the bigger things, because you can be grateful for your surroundings, but at some point the gratitude continues to expand to relationships, to health. And the extra credit, of course, is when we're in the midst of challenges or crises, can we be grateful for those as well?
Mhm.
Because that's the extra credit.
Ooh,
If
that's the
you
extra
can,
credit on that one. Can
to
you
me,
go?
when it comes to gratitude, that's the extra credit. Yeah, because it's easy to be grateful when everything is going well. I can do this in my sleep. That's the easiest thing in the world. But you and I, believe that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, all of us. And the more we experience life, the more adversity we have faced in the past. So the question is, can we be grateful in the midst of adversity? And to me, unequivocally, yes. It takes a little bit of extra work.
I love that you said that because I think that's part of the biggest challenge for so many of us. And whether that's work stress, life stress, family stress, all of the things. You just came from the fires in LA. I mean, talk
Yeah.
about stress and adversity and what you went through and your family's been through. Could you give us a couple of examples of what you might do as a practice when you're in a state of adversity? So let's say while you were in California, what would be three things that you were still able to find that you were grateful for, even in such a difficult time?
Yeah, and it was only last Wednesday, actually, last week, that I actually was able to get into that specific area in Pacific Palisades because I wanted to see if my parents' old home was still there. I had a feeling it was probably burned to the ground, but it's different when you actually see it.
Right.
And it was the last time that I actually lived with my mom and dad. I was going to
Wow.
UCLA at the time, so it's weird to see that the only thing standing was the fireplace and nothing else. And dear, dear friends who've lost, multiple homes and so on, it's interviewing them and actually seeing them up close, not on the phone. And I was just astounded by the level of calmness. One of them said he lost two homes, like multi-million, like mansions, unbelievable homes. He said, I may be still partially in denial a little bit, but in the end, and he's older, he's like in his early 80s. Imagine you have to restart it in your 80s. Think about that.
No.
He said, you know what? In the end, yes, I've lost a lot of things that are my memories from my parents and so on. But in the end, these are just things. The only thing that matters are people. And my kids are good. And the weirdest thing, my best friend, he's 82 years old, became a grandfather for the first time in his life, 3 hours before the fires burned his house down on the same day.
Oh my
I mean,
God.
he's been on this earth for 82 years and he finally becomes a grandpa. He got married later on in life, had kids when he was older, and he becomes a grandpa. So he says to me, if I had to pick between this little beautiful, perfect baby boy that was just born or my home, I'll take my grandson any day of the week. I can rebuild my home, but that I got to live long enough to see my grand. What are the odds that this would happen 3 hours before the big fires happen?
Crazy. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to gratitude and perspective,
Yeah. Yeah.
and have the right perspective that, yeah, is it going to take 2 or 3 years to rebuild? Yes. She goes, I don't even know if I'm going to be around 2 or 3 years, but I've lived a great life. And all that matters that I got to hold in my hands my grandson.
Mm.
And it was so human in the midst of this tragedy
Yeah.
because he literally has nothing. Like
Yeah.
physically, because I have a jacket, my computer, and my car. I got nothing else.
Yeah.
Everything else is gone. Everything that he's accumulated, he was a cardiologist, physician, very successful, and so on. Everything he had accumulated for 82 years is gone. He has nothing left. But what he has left are relationships and still his health. And, that's it. And it became so simple the way he said it. I had to actually see him up close because I could hear on the phone. I'm like, are you doing as good as you sound like you're doing? So we took him out to dinner. And he actually was doing as good as that
Wow,
he sounded.
that's
And I'm like,
perfect.
I
What a
tip my hat
perfect
up to him. Good
example.
for you.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And it's really interesting. It's kind of the perfect leeway up and from your expertise, this is one of the other biggest questions that people are asking on Google. Does money buy happiness?
No, and in his case, because he's like very, very successful, anyway, very successful. No, but it does buy you freedom, I think, to some degree.
Mm.
But it doesn't buy you, it buys you some freedom to be able to travel and to do certain things. And help other people. He's one of the most generous people, by the way. Speak about kindness. He's so generous. Even when he's lost everything, he's thinking like, well, I need to support this cause. Like, don't you need to concentrate on rebuilding your house? He goes, no, but I still need to, help other people. And I'm like, wow, like who does that when they've lost everything? You think they would go into like the poor me? And I guess this is the other, I guess, happiness hack. When something bad happens to you, quote unquote bad, it's easy to fall into the victim mode and say, why did this happen to me? What have I done? Why did this happen to me? But if we change that question and say, why did this happen for me? Then
Oh,
I shift from being the
love that.
victim to go into like, oh, now I'm open, now I'm curious, and to see why did this happen for me? Maybe there's a reason why it happened for me.
Okay, hold on. We need to go back to that. I want everybody to hear that because that was a
Yeah,
that was a quick change right there, but that's such an important one. So say that again, Dr.
yeah.
Elia. What do
When
we
when
need to
things
do?
happen
We
to
need to
us,
swap
when we
from
yeah, it's normal to say, why is this happening to me?
why is this
What did I
happening
ever
to
do?
me?
I'm a
Right,
good person. I help other people. Why did I lose everything? That's a
right,
normal reaction.
right.
But at some point, if we shift, say, why did this happen for me?
Oh, I love
And
that.
what
Why
I
does
heard
that
is,
happen? Yeah,
I
okay.
know.
Yeah.
Who gave a great answer to that was Mel Gibson, the famous director, actor, so on, who lost his $15 million home in the Palisades, who said, you know what? In some ways, it's a clean slate. I don't have any more things left.
Right.
And I am unburdened by the things because we have so many things, especially in the Western world, the United States, Canada. We have so many
Oh,
things.
so much stuff.
And he says, I'm now free because I
Oh,
have no more things. I have nothing left either.
yeah.
And I'm like, what a perspective. That's a
Mhm.
different perspective than saying, I've lost everything for me, right?
Yeah.
So I love that perspective
Well, it's really looking at life through a different lens, isn't it? And
completely.
and how we can change that up. So that's a great question. I want to make sure everybody really had captured that question. And we'll put that as well in our description so people can go back to that. So that's amazing. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've talked about money. We talked about how we can be happier. Let's talk about our health. We started the show off, and you were talking about, that one of the reasons you started going out for those walks because it is important for our health. But how is happiness? How does it actually relate to our health, and is it actually help us?
I think there's two things. First of all, happy people by nature tend to be healthier, like physiologically healthier. I'm not talking about mentally or emotionally, that's a given. I'm talking about physically healthier because they do practice self-care.
Mhm.
I don't know anybody who's truly happy for the most part in their life that doesn't practice self-care. For me personally, my self-care is a non-negotiable. Now, when we have a crisis or a challenge, guess what the first thing that goes out the window is? Self-care. Why? Because we say, oh, I don't have time to do that because I got to deal with what's in front of me. You know what? When you have a crisis or a challenge, double down on your self-care.
Yeah.
It needs to be the other way around. More self-care in order to be able to deal with the crisis or the challenge more effectively. But human nature, like we abandon ourselves because we're in fear mode, right?
Mm.
Because
And
we have a
that's
challenge.
cortisol going right through our
Exactly.
body. Let's talk
Right.
about cortisol for a moment, right?
That chemical that runs, yeah, and that's what happens. So we want to minimize the
Right.
cortisol and maximize the happy.
Maximize our serotonin, right? And all those
Exactly.
good things. Well, and what
Right.
we know about cortisol and our stress, and that's directly related to our happiness, is cortisol literally makes us sick. They've now tied it to cancer producing cells in our body that actually make us sick, not healthier. So, I love that you brought that up because that's the perfect answer right there is being happier, make you healthier. Well, it does just for the chemical
Absolutely.
reaction in your body, isn't it?
And again, human nature is like, I'm so stressed out.
Right.
We hear this every day, all the time from people. I'm so stressed out. I'm so stressed out. What if we were to say, I'm so happy today? In the same, no, I'm talking about with the same energy that we said, I'm so stressed
Absolutely.
out. Think about it,
Absolutely.
like people might look at you like, you're kind of strange. What's wrong with you? But, right, I believe that we all stand in choice every single day. Some days are better than others. There are days that I get up in the morning, I'm like, I have aches and pains. No, and other days that I don't. But you know what? If I have aches and pains, it means I've lived a long time, and I'm grateful for that. And this too shall pass. I have a big picture perspective, and my wife says, "How do you do that? My whole life, I have a big picture. No matter what happens, I pull back the lenses of the camera and see
Right.
the big picture, meaning that this too shall pass. No matter what happens, this too shall pass."
Yeah. It changes moment by moment, right? And we know that, especially about our emotional states, is one day it'll be one thing, the next day it'll be another. I don't know, somebody sends you a text message and all of a sudden your whole world has changed and you're happy again, right? So we know that
Or vice versa, you
it's a
get hijacked.
state that ebbs and flows, right?
But you can get a text or an email or a phone call that sort of hijacks you initially
Yeah.
emotionally. The question is, how long does that last? And
Right.
do I stay in my fear mode, in my inner critic mode, or in my victim mode, or do I pivot and begin to navigate whatever challenge I'm finding, especially if we get curious as to why this is happening for me. I think that's a
Mhm.
huge thing. I
That
cannot
is,
overemphasize
yeah.
enough because when you say, why is this happening for me? Now you're looking for a solution and a lesson that's
Right.
going to
How can I
bless your
learn from
life.
this? Yeah.
Exactly.
I love that.
Exactly.
That's perfect.
Otherwise,
It's
we
like we
stay
can
stuck
relate that back every time.
every time.
Every
Yeah.
time. Perfect. Well, I want to move, and this is kind of a great lead in because we use our phones so much, and people are using apps for finding relationships, making relationships, their soulmate, all on one app. And so I want to talk about happiness and relationships. And I know this is one of the areas that you have really specialized in your lifetime. And a combination, it's almost a two-point question on this one.
Okay.
And one is how do relationships influence our happiness? But a
Okay.
big question that's been coming up a lot in the mental health world these days is how do I actually learn to be happy alone without anyone else? And just learning to be happy first for myself, on my own, all about me, so that I can bring that to a relationship.
Yeah. Happiness is an inside job, Jacqueline.
Oh, is that it? You're
I'm
right.
sorry. I'm sorry. Happiness
I
is an
love
inside job.
that. Okay, did
What?
everybody get that? End all be all. It's an
Hello.
inside job. Stop looking
It's
for it everywhere else.
it's an inside job. And as a matter of fact,
Perfect.
when we practice the self-care and the gratitude and the kindness and so on, I think then we can attract a person that actually resonates with that energy and we're on that level.
Mm,
So to me,
mm.
happiness is an inside job. Nobody's responsible for my happiness but myself. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
stop. Don't say
No, it's
another
true.
word. Did
It's
everybody
true
hear
though.
that? Say that again.
I said that nobody's responsible for my happiness by myself.
Amen. Drop the mic on that one. I think that's one of our biggest problems is that we think that either somebody else is responsible for our happiness or other people think that it's our job. I know being a mom, I am sure my children think that their happiness is my job. I'm sure about that one.
But at some point, that may be as we're raising them or we're teaching them and so on. But at some point, we have to do a handoff, like we do in football, and say, now it's your life and your choices and your desires. Um, so it's up to you, in
Yeah.
essence. And that's another, especially for moms. I think moms have a little hard time letting go of that. But
Oof.
ultimately, it's your boys, it's their job for their happiness at some point.
Well, I
That's
keep telling them
normal.
that. I'm working on it.
Yeah. Now, to answer the other question about, so I definitely believe that happiness is an inside job, and I have to do the work for myself. However, let's say we do all this stuff, we practice all the self care, we just massive, we do all the things that we need to find our own personal happiness. But we surround ourselves with toxic people, we're going to pay a price.
Mm.
I don't care how much self-care you do. If you're surrounded by toxicity in your relationships, both personal, professional, family, or whatever, that is going to rob you of your health and happiness. There's no question about that.
Well, that's really
So
one of the things we could look at as a tool, right? Is take a look around your life. What are you surrounding yourself with? I promise you, I'm about to have a cat come walking across my screen in a minute. They're my happy spot for sure. I know I can just sit and pet them all day and I'll be in a very peaceful, happy place. But I think that's a really big one is that we really need to examine the people in our lives, whether you're best friends, we don't always have a choice on family, but we can choose how long we spend with them. And what influence do they have when we're with them? And I think that's a big part because that really ties into how are you just okay being alone? I know a lot of people aren't very comfortable being them by themselves, and they think, well, it's better to be with people that maybe are a little toxic because they're so afraid of being by themselves.
right. And that's why those two are tied together. And I will speak to you as someone who 21 years ago, when I went through my own personal physical crisis, I had burned out, almost got sick, almost killed me. And I came out of that a different person because it was so painful. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want toxic people in my life anymore. And I made a conscious, deliberate, mindful decision that I'm not going to have any more toxic people in my life. And I don't. When I say that, people are like, well, you got to be kidding. Are you serious? I'm like, I'm dead serious. And when it comes, then we have a discussion. And a lot of people said, well, Dr. Elia, what if it's a member of your family? I'm like, of course it's going to be a member of at least one person, maybe
It's going to
two.
be at least
Maybe
one.
yes. Yeah. So sometimes we can't divorce members of our family, if you will, but we can set certain boundaries in a very clear, concise, and meaningful way. And my way of doing that, we can practice it right now. It's a 30-second, really, this is how the conversation, and I call these conversations, they're HOT, HOT, which stands for honest, open, and transparent.
Mm.
They're not, and it takes some practice. The first time you do a hot conversation, I know when I did it, my heart was like da 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 da, like I was nervous, but it worked. The conversation goes as this: Jacqueline, or whatever family member you have, for the most part, do I treat you with love, kindness, and respect? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then I'm like, okay, then I expect you now to also treat me with love, kindness, and respect in return. But what matters is how I show up in my relationship first. In other words, I can't be a jerk to you and then expect you to treat me with love, kindness, and respect. I got to look in the mirror first and say, how am I showing up in my relationships? But as long as I show up with love, kindness, and respect, then I have every right to expect the others to do the same in return. And guess what? And if you don't do it, either we're not going to have a relationship at all, or we're going to have a very superficial relationship where we'll text happy birthday once a year to one another. But if you want to have a meaningful, loving, kind, deep, connected relationship, you need to start treating me with love, kindness, and respect. And if you don't, you're going to be in timeout for the next 6 months. We'll have another discussion then. See if you learn the lesson. And I'm not rejecting you. I'm just saying I expect you to treat me the same way that I treat you. Period.
Mm.
Isn't
And
that fair though?
and that's the best thing to take a look at too is are you showing up that way?
That's the
Right.
that's
And
the
that's
first one.
self-examination, right? And that's
Right.
I love that this conversation keeps going back to us, right? Like how are you showing up in your own world? Are you showing up as a happier person? Are you showing up as a reflection of happiness for the people around you as well? Because you can't expect everybody else to be happy if you're not doing the work yourself.
Nor can I be unkind, unloving, disrespectful, and so on, and then expect you to treat me well. That's not fair either to you. So that's why I look in the mirror first. And if I need to have some course correction in my own behavior or apologize or ask for forgiveness, I'm happy to do it. But ultimately, I do want to have deep and profound relationships on multiple levels: family,
Mm.
friends, colleagues, clients, customers, whatever, the whole thing, right? It
And
starts.
learning that it's okay to be alone or only have one or two great friends. Better to
Well,
have one or two great people in your life and being okay being by yourself, which is a practice, right? And not needing all that outside stimulation to be, coming in or at you or having to be around people and fill that space for no reason, right?
but if you're kind and loving to yourself, it's much easier to be with yourself by yourself.
Right.
If you struggle with yourself, then maybe the universe is trying to tell you, hey, it's time to spend some alone time and stop escaping on your phone, TV, computers, and all that stuff. Stop escaping and get quiet and take a look in the mirror. There's this beautiful exercise, a mirror exercise that I've done with many, many of my clients. I've done it myself, where you
Yeah.
actually look in the mirror, and you know how hard it is for people to look in the mirror.
Yep.
Have you ever done that? Actually,
I
it's
have, you know
hard.
what? I'll let you know. I actually do it every day. I bought myself a big heart-shaped mirror specifically for the reason that every day I stop to tell myself that I love myself because I was terrible at it. And to look at that mirror and say, you know what? Those wrinkles, you earned every one of them. You know what?
Exactly.
Like whatever it is that I started to have a positive conversation with myself and I talk to myself
I
with
agree.
kindness and love and understanding the way I talk to all of my friends. I had to practice that for myself, even at my ripe old age.
No, absolutely. And sometimes I look in the mirror and it's like, man, you and I have been through a lot together, haven't we?
Right.
But it's now because I'm old. I mean, it's such a good place that it's a lighthearted conversation.
Yeah.
I think when we struggle with our self-worth and self-esteem or whatever, that's not easy to do.
Yeah,
I've had
absolutely.
people that
That's a
that
great
go that
practice.
start
I want to
crying.
keep pulling
Yeah,
these practices
yeah,
out before we skip past them
of course.
too, so
Yeah,
that people, it's like, you know what? Do that as your own tool, your happiness tool. Start talking nicely to yourself, whether it's in a journal, maybe that's the first step, or in a mirror. What's the conversation? Are you bullying yourself? Because that's going to reduce your happiness. We know bullies reduce our happiness. Or are you being your, greatest number one supporter and fan? I love that. That's
and
your tool right there, everybody.
and if we struggle with something, self-forgiveness is a key to happiness. And
Mm,
I believe it's undervalued and it doesn't happen enough. And most
yeah.
people do not practice self-forgiveness as much as they should. I don't have anything on my self-forgiveness list, period. My wife says, how do you do that? And I'm like, it's simple. I don't take myself too seriously. That's part of it. Like, don't take yourself so seriously. We're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. And
Mhm.
it's okay to be. And I'm a recovering perfectionist, mind you. So going back to my crisis 21 years ago, that was a big part of it because I had to let go of my perfectionism.
Yeah,
And you
none
know
of
what?
us.
And now in fear mode, most people who are perfectionists are afraid. I had to own it that I was afraid that if I let go of the so-called perfect, not that I was perfect back then, that somehow my performance or who I was, it was going to go downhill. The opposite happened because I wasn't stressing out as much anymore as I used to.
Mm.
So less stress, less cortisol, happier me,
Right.
period.
Well, and I love you said that as well, because what we know about happiness too is when your brain is happier, you're actually more productive, you're more successful,
Exactly.
right? Your brain works better, whether this is at school for younger people, this is for your kids, this is you as an adult at work, is that a happy brain actually just works better, right? It
Exactly.
affects the prefrontal cortex, and all of a sudden, you're a much more high performing person. So I love that you brought that up because that's such a key component to happiness. We don't just talk about our health, but how we perform in life and the happy we are, we're more creative. I mean, the list is endless when it comes to that one, having a
Yeah,
happy
but my
brain.
inner critic had fooled me for decades prior to that, that if I let go of that perfectionism and strive, to do your best all the time and so on, that somehow my performance would suffer. The opposite happened,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like you
I
said.
love that. Okay, I said we were going to be tight today. I know you've got another
Oh, we're
podcast
good.
coming up. You're in
Yeah,
high
we're good.
demand at the moment with International Day of Happiness coming up. So my last question for you, if you were to give us 5 things we could start doing today that would help us literally have a happy life, because that would be the name of the show today, is what are your 5 things that we could all start doing today to have a happy life?
I mean, we've talked about, I think for me, movement in especially nature is one.
Yeah.
Gratitude is number two, but
Okay.
also go the extra mile and grateful for when things appear to be setbacks, weaknesses, human
Mm,
frailties, mistakes, or whatever. And that
perfect.
ties into the self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
So just have a clean slate. Um, I think the other thing, you know, sometimes when I get down, which it doesn't happen as often, but it happens, I'm a human being. One of the best ways to get out of that is to go and help somebody else.
Right.
In other words, and I know this almost seems to go counter to what we talked about self-care. It's like, kind of like forget yourself for a little bit and go and perform an act of kindness, but a deliberate, not a random act of kindness. Like go out and help somebody else. Because if you look around, I promise you there's somebody else worse off than you are right now
Yeah.
within your sphere of influence. I guarantee it. So I
I love
think
that.
that kindness and the ability to help somebody else also makes us feel better. So I think
Mhm.
that's crucial.
That is crucial. I talk about that all the time, right? You want to feel better, just go help somebody else.
That's it. So there's a balance between the self-care and also, reaching out and helping other people. And then get rid of any toxicity in that's around you. I think you got to do that now. Life is too short to be around toxic people, family or otherwise. And you know the formula: how you show up the right way, and expect others to do the same. Set some healthy boundaries, hold them accountable. And the beautiful thing that happens is that most people step up to their best selves when you hold them accountable. Say, "Hey, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I expect you to be loving, kind, and respectful." Most people actually show up that way.
Yeah.
You're actually helping them to become better humans and happier humans
Yeah.
themselves
And you're
by
reflecting that back, right?
exactly by modeling
Mhm.
the behavior yourself.
Right.
Right.
I love that. Okay,
That's
so we're
it.
just going to do a quick overview. I was writing those down because I didn't want to miss a thing for this show. So, ways today you can
Right
start
now.
being happier and create. And I think that was the really big one that I got from you too, Dr. Elia, was, nobody is responsible for your happiness but you, and it's a
I'm sorry.
decision.
I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Completely. We're doing the quick review at the end,
Yeah.
right? So we need to start creating our own happiness for ourselves. And so we start with self-care, which was the big one that we talked about, getting connected and being out in nature, connecting to yourself, something bigger than, just what's stuck in our head and getting ourselves out there. Gratitude, a big one. And we can all do that, whether it's three gratitude practices in the morning, three at night. That's a big one that's in. Or like you said, when you're out in nature, just look around at the beauty that this planet gives us. That's an easy one. Clear the toxicity out of your life as much as you can. Create some boundaries that are going to help keep you safe and protected from some of that toxicity. And learning that it's better to be alone than with toxic people in your life.
All day long. But you got to like yourself and love yourself in order to do that. Because if you
Yep.
enjoy your own company, then you're not afraid to be alone. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yes, completely. And I think that's the biggest thing for people, right? They're just afraid to be alone. So get that mirror out, start talking to yourself today. We talked about that. And the big one, and of course, my favorite is kindness, generosity, and giving. If you want to have a happy, meaningful, purposeful life, go out and help somebody else.
That's it.
So that's the way we can all celebrate International Day of Happiness, is if we all go out and do one small thing to help someone else, all of a sudden we have this beautiful world that we all get to live in.
There's the happy formula right there. You got it.
That's it. We did it. And we did it in 30 minutes or less. How many love that? Okay,
Hey,
so you have your happiness formula. You have your recipe for happiness. It's all right here. Dr. Elia, my friend, I love you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your expertise with us because that's what I know that your purpose on this planet is to really help elevate everyone to their own happiness. So thank you. I love
and,
you.
and then one last thing, P.S. My happy place is Greece, as you know. I expect to see you there this
I'm
year.
coming. I'm coming.
Okay, sounds
See
great.
you this fall.
All right, sounds good. Love
Love you,
you.
my friend. Have a
Okay,
beautiful day.
thank you. Bye.